Unbeknownst to any of them, this one call amid the turbulent Normandy waves would ignite the deadliest armored advance in the entire European campaign. France's bocage landscape had convinced German troops that their Tigers and Panthers reigned supreme as top hunters, boasting unmatched plating, lethal 88mm cannons, and engineering finesse that rendered them almost unbeatable when holding ground. The Wehrmacht's tank strategy had carved out deadly sectors throughout the Normandy terrain. Scores of hidden spots, anti-tank artillery aimed at every entry point, and barriers plus traps that funneled Allied tanks into scripted slaughter areas. The Sherman tank pushed forward through the English Channel at 4 knots, its Chrysler 57 multi-bank motor laboring under 33 tons of metal and resolve. When equipped with the duplex drive mechanism, each M4A4 Sherman displaced enough liquid to submerge a modest structure. Staff Sergeant Paul Reagan positioned himself in the commander's opening on his tank within LCT 600, assessing the battlefield layout. His vehicle held 90 shells for the 75mm cannon, 4,150 rounds for the 30 caliber machine gun, and the aspirations of the whole seaborne operation. The Sherman embodied America's practical approach to manufacturing at its core. In contrast to the German Tigers, which demanded 250,000 Reichsmarks and expert servicing, the Sherman allowed for rapid assembly, overseas transport, and fixes by rural lads from Kansas with everyday equipment. Just Chrysler's Detroit tank plant was turning out more than 400 Shermans monthly by 1944. The numbers spoke volumes. As Germany labored to build 100 Tigers each month, U.S. plants were outputting over 2,000 Shermans at their highest rate. Add in superior dependability, lower fuel use, and simpler upkeep, and the advantage turned decisive. Tank leader William Focusad had drilled with the 743rd Tank Battalion at Camp Laguna in Arizona. A battle-hardened fighter who would go on to receive a Silver Star and Purple Heart, Focusad knew that success in armored combat went beyond mere plate gauge or weapon size. It hinged on delivering firepower accurately, sustaining momentum in action, and above all, adjusting to combat realities quicker than the foe could counter. Inside Panther Tank No. 4 and 24 from the 2nd Panzer Division, Unteroffizier Klaus Weber checked his ordnance supplies. 79 projectiles for the extended 75mm KWK-42 cannon, 4,200 machine gun rounds. His Panther's front armor reached 100mm in thickness, angled at 55 degrees to yield an equivalent of 140 mm. American 75mm weapons couldn't breach it inside 100 meters. Weber's machine weighed 45 tons, driven by a Maybach HL-230P30 power plant that guzzled fuel in ways that would alarm U.S. supply experts. The Panther managed 1 mile per gallon on pavement, only half that off-road. Yet, nestled low behind a Normandy hedge with cross-covering sightlines, the Panther had no need for mobility. Its role was simply to destroy. German setups along Omaha Beach reflected 2 years of defensive buildup. Widerstand's Nest 62, dominating the Easy Red area, featured several machine gun nests, a 50mm anti-tank piece, and mortar emplacements. Heinrich Sau, operating an MG-42, later boasted of unleashing over 12,000 rounds, a claim scholars dismiss as wildly overstated, considering the sheer infeasibility and overall losses. The ambush zones achieved ideal precision. Intersecting fire patterns left no safe gaps for assailants to hide. Preset artillery targets allowed mortars to rain down on any beach spot in under 30 seconds after spotting a threat. By Oro 550 on June 6th, Captain Elder on LCT 2037 gauged the sea conditions via his drenched binoculars. Swells hit 5 to 6 feet. Winds blew at 18 knots from the west. The DD tank's fabric enclosures, meant for 3-foot waters, would buckle here. From the 64 Sherman DD tanks slated to wade in at Omaha Beach, just 29 from the 741st Tank Battalion in the eastern zones would try. Of them, 27 would go under in the chilly channel depths. In contrast, Elder's 700-watt 3rd Tank Battalion held back from launching. His 32 DD tanks, along with accompanying units, would instead travel fully loaded on their landing craft. LCTs drove straight onto the green and red sectors of Dog Beach. This approach left the vulnerable landing craft open to enemy gunfire, yet the other option involved seeing the tanks sink into the sea. The choice boiled down to harsh calculations: endanger the vessels and their sailors, or sacrifice the armor and its soldiers without them ever engaging the foe. At row 6:15, the naval barrage began. USS Texas unleashed 14-inch projectiles toward the cliffs overlooking Omaha. USS Arkansas contributed with 12-inch salvos. Lighter destroyers edged to within 1,000 yards of the shore, targeting obvious defenses head-on. The shelling was planned for 40 minutes to demolish German strongpoints ahead of the initial assault wave. However, many rounds sailed past their marks. Overcast skies caused the big bombers to drop their loads too soon, scattering bombs uselessly across inland pastures. From the 446 B-24 Liberators bombing Omaha Beach, 0 strikes landed on the sand itself. The Sherman's debut in battle at Omaha occurred at 6:29, just 1 minute shy of H-hour. Company A from the 743rd Tank Battalion, equipped with deep water gear, launched right from their LCTs into 4 feet of surf. These vehicles featured waterproofing via specialized packs, with exhaust pipes raised by makeshift extensions enabling fords up to 6 feet deep. The lead tanks reached the shore, their treads scraping the pebbles as 75mm cannons pivoted toward the heights. The Germans' counterattack proved ruthless at first. An 88mm gun in WN-61 unleashed 8 shots in 90 seconds. 3 Shermans burst apart, their 75mm ammo detonating in massive fireballs visible from ships at sea. Bullets from machine guns pinged against tank bodies like infernal hail. Mortar blasts methodically stalked the sand, zeroing in on vehicles with deadly accuracy. Still, more Shermans pressed forward. By Auto 740 tanks had made it to Omaha Beach. A few were ablaze, others shed tracks on barricades or got stuck in the gravel. But the functional ones started pounding German sights with point-blank shots. The mental toll hit right away. Enemy foot soldiers, prepared for a foot attack, now confronted steel beasts that shrugged off small arms fire and retaliated with explosive rounds. Technical Sergeant John DeCone from the 743rd Tank Battalion came ashore in the second wave at 6:40. His Sherman absorbed 2 strikes from a 50mm anti-tank weapon. The shells pierced the armor but spared vital parts. Driver: Private First Class. Howard Froberg charged straight at the threat as the loader fired 5 high-explosive shells into the bunker. The enemy gun went quiet. This scenario repeated itself. With radios mostly ruined by seawater, lone tank leaders waged isolated battles against particular foes. A Sherman endured repeated blows from lighter guns while systematically neutralizing pillboxes using its 75mm main weapon and the forward and .30 caliber machine gun. That front gun setup, distinctive to U.S. designs, excelled at pinning down German troops as the primary cannon tackled fortified spots. By 0730, observers from the fleet could see the dire situation at Omaha Beach. General Omar Bradley, aboard USS Augusta, pondered redirecting later waves to Utah Beach. The 16th Infantry Regiment suffered devastating losses. Company A no longer functioned as a cohesive force. Company E dwindled to 23 survivors out of 180. Wreckage and injured troops clogged the shore, huddling behind enemy barriers for shelter. Yet, the tanks shifted the tide. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Plugger, leading Company C of the 743rd Tank Battalion, ordered his unit to target defenses at Le Moulin Draw. Drawing on practiced tactics, they launched white phosphorus shells to spot objectives, then hammered them with explosives. The phosphorus offered a bonus. Its searing fragments seeped through viewports and firing slits, compelling occupants to flee. At 08:15, Widerstand's Nest 66 messaged German headquarters, enemy armor on the beach, troops shattered but vehicles pushing ahead, urgent call for anti-tank aid. The reply chilled them, no reserves on the move. The 352nd Infantry Division's anti-tank unit sat 10 miles back, restrained by Field Marshal Rommel's directive to counter anticipated paratroop drops. Shore forces must stand firm with existing assets. The Sherman's straightforward engineering now shone through. Tank Barbara from Company B, 743rd Tank Battalion, under Sergeant Walter Basker, weathered 7 impacts from assorted arms in the opening hour. It shed 2 bogey wheels, its turret rotation jammed, and fuel seeped out, but the team patched it up on site with onboard tools and spares. By 0900, Barber returned to the fray, blasting German holdings at Vierville Draw. This resilience marked the Sherman's key strength. A DA repairing a King Tiger or Panther demanded dedicated recovery units and skilled technicians. In contrast, a Sherman tank could often be fixed right there by its own team, scavenging components from wrecked vehicles. During the D-Day invasion, Sherman operators pulled off remarkable feats of on-site repairs. They swapped out treads while under enemy fire. Barrels ruined by incoming shells got replaced in just 20 minutes. Motors that normally needed full workshop overhauls were nursed back into action through clever fixes and sheer resolve. At Auro 845, the initial German armored units showed up. A pair of Stu-G3 assault guns from the 352nd Infantry Division's gun detachment fired on the Shermans from 800 meters away. Those 75mm Stu-K40 cannons were capable of piercing Sherman plating at such a distance, yet the U.S. tanks held a key edge: sheer quantity. 5 Shermans countered each German gun. The Stu-Gs knocked out 2 American tanks before falling to a barrage from several opponents. By Oro 900, tank-supported engineers had blasted openings in the seawall at Easy Red sector. Shermans started pushing beyond the shoreline, hitting German strongpoints from the side. This marked the pivotal shift. Nazi defense strategy hinged on trapping invaders right on the sand. As soon as tanks broke through to the interior, the whole fortified network started collapsing. Private First Class Charles Lombardo from the 741st Tank Battalion had made it to land in one of just 2 DD tanks that succeeded. His vehicle, soaked and hardly operational, took out a concrete pillbox at 100 meters using 5 armor-piercing shots and then high-explosive rounds. That structure had stalled an entire infantry company's progress. Once eliminated, 150-foot soldiers could finally advance past the beach. The German counter to the tank surge adhered to standard procedures. Panzerfaust squads were sent out to set up short-range traps. The Panzerfaust, a one-use anti-tank launcher, could punch through 200 millimeters of armor from 30 meters. In the bocage terrain beyond Omaha Beach, every hedgerow might hide a Panzerfaust crew. Yet U.S. forces had absorbed hard lessons from the setbacks at Kasserine Pass in Sicily. Close teamwork between infantry and armor had been practiced without let-up. Each Sherman heading inland was accompanied by foot troops scanning hedges and structures for ambush groups. At 10:30, fresh German foot soldiers arrived carrying Panzerfausts. The weapon, a disposable anti-tank tool, could breach 200 millimeters of armor at 30 meters. Every hedgerow inland from the shore might shelter such a team. Still, Americans drew from the failures at Kasserine Pass in Sicily. Armor infantry coordination got hammered home in training. Advancing Shermans were flanked by soldiers probing spots for anti-tank lurkers. In the ensuing days after D-Day, heavy German tanks rolled in strength. Panthers of the 2nd Panzer Division and Tigers from the 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion clashed with U.S. armor around Caumont and Vierville. These fights followed a recurring pattern. German vehicles outmatched rivals one-on-one, but American methods stressed coordinated shooting and movement. As one Sherman squad pinned down the foe head-on, others swung around for side-angle strikes. The odds were harsh yet successful. Sacrificing 3 Shermans to bag a single Panther seemed worthwhile, given that the U.S. churned out 30 Shermans for each Panther Germany assembled. By midday on D-Day, 51 Sherman tanks remained active across Omaha Beach and nearby interior zones. Losses had been devastating. 40% destroyed or sidelined, but the objective was met. The landing zone was under control. Subsequent landings proceeded without disastrous tolls. Above all, the blow to German morale was profound. The legend of an unbreakable Atlantic wall lay in ruins. At headquarters for the German 352nd Infantry Division, General Dietrich Kreis got piecemeal updates all morning. U.S. tanks overpowering coastal barriers, Widerstands nests overrun, foe armor pressing toward Colleville. By 1300, Kreis realized Omaha Beach had slipped away. Lacking tank backups to challenge the Americans, his troops managed only a retreating battle. The Sherman's role went further than frontline clashes. They shielded engineers as they dismantled barriers, sparing them from withering machine gun fire. Their 75mm cannons targeted bunkers beyond naval guns' reach. Crucially, the boost to U.S. infantry morale was game-changing. Troops frozen in place on the shore started pushing ahead upon spotting tanks in motion. Innovations rolled out for D-Day delivered as promised. Secretly devised deep-water gear, trial run in Scotland, let tanks hit beaches in deeper surf and dodge the densest barrier fields. Sealed ammo compartments averted deadly blasts on impact. Above all, fitting armored phones to tank rear decks enabled troops on the ground used hand signals to coordinate with armored units even after their communication equipment failed. By 2 p.m. on D-Day, U.S. tanks were moving forward into the interior toward their assigned goals for the day. Progress lagged behind schedule. What appeared as mere hedgerows in overhead images turned out to be serious barriers. These old earthen barriers, some originating from the Roman era, measured 3 to 4 feet wide at the bottom, capped with thick foliage and bordered by water channels. Armored vehicles trying to scale them left their vulnerable undersides open to enemy projectiles, yet U.S. resourcefulness was quick to respond. Sergeant Curtis Cullen from the 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron observed that the steel tetrahedrons meant to shred boat hulls on the shore could be repurposed and attached to tank fronts as tools for slicing through brush. Soon after coming ashore, repair teams began adapting vehicles with these makeshift cutters. A serviceman from Tennessee called Roberts proposed the concept. Why not attach some serrated edges to the vehicle's nose and slice right through the thickets? Cullen immediately saw the value in that straightforward idea. The Nazi leadership's reaction to the invasion in Normandy suffered from disarray and direct meddling by Hitler himself. The Führer, certain that the assault was just a diversion and the main strike would hit near Pas-de-Calais, held back the key armored reserves. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, positioned 130 miles away, received orders to move only in the late afternoon. When they finally reached the area, U.S. forces had set up defensive lines along every primary route to the landing zone. At 4 p.m. on D-Day, elements of Company B from the 743rd Tank Battalion faced their initial Tiger I close to Formigny. This beast, belonging to the 101st SS Heavy Panzer Battalion, had been sent from its spot near Caen to stop the Allied push. Its commander, SS Obersturmführer Wilhelm Müller, was a battle-hardened fighter from Kursk, where his vehicle had taken out 19 Soviet T-34s. The 88mm cannon could punch through a Sherman from 2,000 meters away. The clash highlighted how U.S. crews had adapted their tactics. Rather than confronting the Tiger directly, the Sherman unit's leader, Lieutenant James Johnson, directed his men to launch smoke shells to blind the enemy. As a single Sherman kept up covering shots, the other 3 swung around via a nearby grove of trees. The Tiger, locked on the isolated tank targeting its strong front plating, missed the side attack until it was too late. From 200 meters, the flanking Shermans hammered 5 shells into the Tiger's power unit. The huge machine lurched to a stop, belching fumes from its back. Müller's team fled their flaming vehicle, but the event sent shockwaves among the Germans. If even Tigers fell to Shermans, how could foot soldiers hold out? Updates to German headquarters described a worsening scenario. Overwhelming foe armor, several Tigers and Panthers lost, and troops pulling back from mechanized thrusts. The truth was more complex. For each successful side assault, Sherman suffered dearly in straight-on fights. Still, Allied strategy tolerated such sacrifices. The Sherman was built to suffice, not to excel. It fit aboard regular Liberty ships, with 2 units occupying the hold space for a single Tiger. Conscript technicians needed just 3 months of prep to service it. Above all, factories churned them out in quantities where casualties didn't hurt overall strength. By 6 p.m. on D-Day, the 743rd and 741st tank units had formed a steady front extending from Omaha Beach. They suffered 48 vehicles wrecked or out of action, with 45 fatalities and 60 injuries among crews. Yet they landed 58 working tanks and shattered the Atlantic defenses. enemy losses proved tougher to tally, but featured numerous strongpoints razed, 3 self-propelled guns eliminated, 1 Tiger and 3 Panthers taken down, plus hundreds of foot soldiers hit. Key insights on tech emerged right away. Though the Sherman's 75mm weapon couldn't pierce thick German plating from the front, it wrecked bunkers and troops with ruthless efficiency. The vehicle's durability in battle surpassed predictions. After enduring seawater, shore hazards, and fierce action, 70% of landed Shermans remained functional by nightfall. By comparison, 5 of the 6 Tiger IIs sent to Normandy in July failed mechanically before seeing action. During the evening of June 6 to 7, U.S. repair squads labored in the gloom. With oxyacetylene cutters, they broke apart German coastal traps and fastened rough but useful brush-clearing attachments to Sherman prows. By morning on June 7th, 15th machines sported the upgrades. In under 7 days, 60% of U.S. tanks in the region would equip these rhino fittings, so dubbed for their horn-like spikes. The log from the German 352nd Infantry Division on June 7th noted, "Faux armored assaults backed by heavy barrages have rendered holding lines impossible. Pull back to secondary lines." The authorization of that line signaled a profound change in German defensive strategy. The Atlantic Wall wasn't simply penetrated, it was made irrelevant by U.S. armored forces. In his later accounts, First Army Commander Lieutenant General Omar Bradley noted, "The tanks rescued Omaha Beach. Absent their support, we would have been driven back into the ocean." This assessment rang true. Among the 29 infantry companies that stormed Omaha Beach, half endured devastating losses, yet the 2 tank battalions, even after sustaining significant damage, retained their ability to advance all day long. Their role converted what could have been a catastrophe into a hard-fought success. In the ensuing weeks after D-Day, U.S. armored tactics fully matured. Operation Cobra, initiated on July 25th, exemplified American integrated warfare methods. Roughly 3,000 planes unleashed a barrage of bombs on German lines. Around 700 Shermans, with 60% fitted with Rhino hedge cutters, broke through the bocage terrain. That advance shifted the deadlock in Normandy toward a fluid battle suited to American tank design. Sergeant Cullen's hedge cutter evolved into standard gear. Just 6 weeks post-D-Day, 500 Shermans received adaptations featuring different hedge-clearing tools. The British crafted their counterpart, known as prongs. The advancement proliferated quickly. By August, German spies noted that all opposing tanks now carried hedge-busting attachments. Bocage strongholds became unsustainable. Throughout the operation, the Panther tank held a technical edge. Its extended 75mm cannon could pierce Sherman plating from distances beyond the Sherman's effective reach. Yet, such advantages couldn't offset the disadvantages of fewer numbers, supply issues, and frequent breakdowns. Research from the British Operational Analysis Group revealed that Panthers in Normandy operated at just 37% readiness versus 70% for Shermans. The numbers of wear and tear proved relentless. Germany built about 6 of the Panthers across the whole conflict, while America manufactured 49,234 Shermans, approaching 50,000 when counting every model. In Normandy by itself, more than 2,000 Shermans engaged in fighting. Even if German tanks secured a 3.1 destruction rate, which they seldom did, it failed to halt the momentum. Each lost Panther was replaced by 5 Shermans. Each failed Tiger prompted 10 more Shermans to unload at Normandy's Mulberry harbors. Come August 1944, German armored units in the region lay in ruins. The 2nd Panzer Division, starting with 180 vehicles, dwindled to 25. The 116th Panzer Division dropped from 120 tanks to scraps, and the elite 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler could field only 17 working tanks out of 150. The Falaise Pocket in mid-August delivered the knockout blow to German armor there. Trapped amid British, Canadian, Polish, and U.S. troops, German tank operators ditched their machines and escaped on foot. Allied aviators described highways clogged with smoldering Tigers and Panthers as retreating crews struggled to service or refuel those cumbersome beasts. U.S. casualties mounted heavily too. The 743rd Tank Battalion, for instance, had 51 tanks completely wrecked in the Normandy fight, plus 80 more needing extensive fixes. Over half the crews suffered wounds or worse. Still, unlike the Germans, Americans replenished their forces. Each wrecked Sherman brought 2 fresh ones from Britain. Each fallen crewman saw 3 substitutes ready. The toll on lives remained stark. Combat in the bocage proved especially savage. Typical tank clashes occurred at 400 meters. At such proximity, the initial shot often decided survival. Crews adopted a grim wit. "The Sherman ignites the first time every time," they'd quip, alluding to Ronson lighter ads. Deep down, though, they recognized their efforts paved the way for triumph. Private First Class Wayne Robinson from Company B, 743rd Tank Battalion, reflected later on his tank Barbara. "She wasn't the finest vehicle around. The Germans boasted superior ones, but she showed up when it mattered. She carried us through Inferno and brought us back. That's the most you demand from a tank or a comrade." Advancements in technology persisted across the campaign. The British Sherman Firefly, armed with a 17-pounder that could breach Tiger armor from 1,000 meters, started deploying in larger quantities. By August, a quarter of British Shermans were Fireflies. U.S. outfits got 76-meter-equipped Shermans from July onward, boosting their tank-busting power, albeit still lagging behind German ordnance. Ultimately, though, the key progress lay in strategy rather than hardware. U.S. Armor principles stressed coordinated forces, speed, and overwhelming volume. Tanks never fought in isolation, but within cohesive units alongside foot soldiers, gunners, sappers, and overhead strikes. This organized method of combat outweighed any single gadget. German tank ace Otto Carius, who accounted for 150 foe vehicles on the Eastern Front later, he would note, "The U.S. forces grasped a key insight that eluded us. Conflict isn't won by deploying the finest armored vehicle. It's achieved with sufficient reliable tanks, supplies to power them, components for repairs, and personnel skilled in operating them. Our designs featured top-tier tanks. They possessed all the supporting elements. Post-war data examinations uncovered the realities of armored clashes in Normandy. A typical Sherman endured about 1.2 strikes in battle. Among those damaged, 60% suffered total destruction. 20% could be fixed on site, while 20% needed advanced workshop overhauls. Remarkably, crew survival figures were strong. 75% of Sherman operators escaped unharmed when their vehicle was disabled. This owed much to the model's spacious exits and the U.S. focus on evacuation drills. In contrast, German models displayed contrasting trends. Panthers typically withstood 2.3 breaches prior to being neutralized, indicating greater resilience to punishment. Yet, after impact, 80% became irretrievable write-offs, hampered by challenges in retrieving and restoring them amid withdrawals. Tiger operators faced just 45% survival odds upon vehicle loss, largely from explosive ammo incidents and cramped hatches. The battles in Normandy reshaped U.S. mechanized strategies. Insights from the bocage terrain influenced operations throughout the continent. Attachments like hedge slicers progressed to bulldozer attachments. Communication devices between tanks and foot soldiers turned into routine gear. Above all, the legend of unmatched German armor was debunked. U.S. crews discovered they could overcome Tigers and Panthers via smarter maneuvers and coordination. By the end of August 1944, with Allied troops surging through France, the broader consequences emerged. Germany didn't merely forfeit a fight, it forfeited its ability to wage fluid operations in the region. The elite of the panzer units smoldered in Norman countryside. Seasoned operators, hardened by the Eastern Front, lay slain or imprisoned. Replacement programs in the Reich couldn't offset such depletion. Historians critiquing the Sherman often zero in on its specs. Its plating was lighter than Axis counterparts. Its cannon packed less punch. Its fuel type burned more readily than diesel options. Such points held merit on their own. However, battles aren't waged in vacuums. The Sherman integrated into a broader framework, manufacturing, supply chain, and battlefield methods that outshone German approaches. Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, who led Allied sea efforts for D-Day, later remarked, "Normandy's triumph stemmed not from one tool or method. It represented the peak of coalition production power, supply dominance, and on-the-fly adjustments. The Sherman captured these strengths, flawed, yet ideally suited for the mission. Its influence lingered past the global conflict. The Sherman's effectiveness reinforced U.S. armed principles, prioritizing mass output, durability, and adaptable use over flawless engineering. This mindset shaped U.S. armor development into the Cold War era. Models like the M48, the M60 series, and initial M1 Abrams variants echoed these priorities. Heinz Guderian, the Blitzkrieg architect and German strategist, reflected in his recollections, "We crafted the ideal tank. The Americans built the one that secured victory." Military leaders everywhere can draw wisdom from this. Perfection hinders adequacy, particularly when adequacy arrives in vast quantities. At Omaha Beach, a current monument features an intact Sherman from the 743rd Tank Battalion. Its body still shows marks from enemy rounds. Local French residents often leave blooms nearby, honoring the freeing forces. The site's plaque states, "To the brave souls who arrived in iron tombs to grant us liberty." This honors the everyday fighters who entered subpar machines and elevated them via bravery, ingenuity, and devotion. Ultimately, the Sherman's triumphs in Normandy and further afield hinged not on plate gauge or barrel size. It reflected U.S. factory output churning out 1,000 units per month. It highlighted rural youths from heartland states servicing intricate gear amid chaos. It showcased inventive solutions such as the Rhino hedgebreaker that swiftly altered combat landscapes. At its core, it demonstrated the power of a free society's war machine, where volume equals potency. The figures paint the picture. During June 1944, Germany maintained roughly 1,500 active tanks across theaters. The U.S. manufactured 2,000 Shermans in that period alone. Come August, Allied units in Western Europe commanded 4,000 armored vehicles. German numbers dipped below 500. The equation of industrialized combat had nullified edge in single engagements. A Tiger could claim isolated wins, but the Sherman had clinched the overall campaign. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, who pushed for placing panzer backups close to the shores, saw his predictions validated. In documents found after his compelled death in October 1944, he had penned, "The Americans will come." He warned that enemy forces could arrive equipped with vast numbers of armored vehicles, thousands no finer than our own, yet in overwhelming quantity. We wouldn't be able to halt such a flood. The conflict would be over the instant the initial U.S. tank emerged from the shore. Yet on June 6, 1944, precisely at 6:29 hours, the lead Sherman tanks from Company A of the 743rd Tank Battalion made landfall on the Normandy coast. That instant sealed the fate of the Western Front, even as countless lives would be claimed before the end. Flawed though it was, the mass-manufactured Sherman, operated by ordinary troops turned warriors, shattered the Atlantic Wall and sparked Europe's freedom. The events of those fateful 12 hours on June 6th would shape military strategies for decades to come. Armies worldwide pored over Normandy's insights, ultimately realizing that in contemporary combat, manufacturing might, supply chain dominance, and flexible tactics outweigh pure engineering feats. The Sherman didn't merely secure a victory, it affirmed a whole philosophy of fighting. Beneath the earth of Normandy, German armored giants remained buried at their last positions. Tigers and Panthers, triumphs of engineering that epitomized the era's tank ingenuity, gradually corrode in place. Their operators, among the finest armored warriors ever, perished defending machines that excelled one-on-one, yet faltered en masse. Both adversaries respected their prowess and bravery. Still, their valiant stand signaled the close of a time when battlefield edge could defy broader weaknesses. Ahead lay dominance for powers excelling in bulk output, swift advancements, and coordinated use of forces. Despite its shortcomings, the Sherman embodied these strengths ideally. It may not have been World War II's superior tank, but it became the one that triumphed in the war. In the calculations of today's battles, such outcomes define the true measure of success.